Given the chance to do it all over again, I let my boyfriend become paralyzed in bed after risking his life to save his Stella. The plane was plummeting rapidly, and Stella clutched her chest, suffering a heart attack. I stopped Ethan from unbuckling his seatbelt and snatched the medication from his hand, throwing it to her. Yet she still became the sole fatality of the plane crash. After that, everything fell into place: engagement, marriage, pregnancy. Until the day I struggled desperately on the operating table during childbirth complications. By then, Ethan had become the hospital's deputy director. Without a shred of emotion, he watched as I slowly lost consciousness. Emma, do you now understand how horrifying it is for a patient to be met with indifference? Turns out, he had hated me all along. Opening my eyes in a new life, I allowed Ethan to unbuckle his seatbelt. Go ahead. Fulfill your duty to save lives. The plane was plummeting rapidly, and the cabin was filled with screams and crying. No one but Ethan noticed Luna clutching her chest, softly pleading for help. The onboard announcement echoed. The plane is experiencing technical difficulties. Passengers, please fasten your seatbelts. Ethan raised his hand and unbuckled his seatbelt, resolute and fearless. If it weren't for discovering a photo of Ethan kissing Luna just before I died in my past life, I might have thought Ethan was driven solely by his professional ethics as a doctor. But the truth, he simply couldn't bear to let his Stella perish here. The turbulence was violent. Unbelted passengers were flung into the air and slammed down hard, sustaining severe injuries. Worried about him getting hurt, I desperately tried to stop him from unbuckling his seatbelt and threw the heart medication to Luna. I even said, "Ethan, save others, but ensure your own safety first." In the end, the plane crash resulted in 1 death, 5 critical injuries, and 8 minor injuries. Luna was the one who died. That very night, Ethan proposed to me. He said we had faced life and death together, hand in hand. I was so moved I cried. But when I confronted him with the photo of him and Luna, he became so agitated that he pushed me pregnant at the time down the stairs. All his supposed affection vanished in an instant. All that remained was a searing, bone-chilling hatred. Emma, you're a doctor too. You stood by and watched a patient die in front of you. Haven't you had nightmares about it all these years? I was rushed to the hospital, bleeding profusely, desperately struggling on the operating table, waiting in vain for a doctor to arrive. Only Ethan, now the hospital's deputy director, walked through the door, his face devoid of emotion as he watched me slowly lose consciousness. Emma, now you understand how horrifying it is for a patient to be met with indifference. You selfish woman, you finally know what Luna suffered. Good. After 10 years of marriage, there wasn't a shred of pity or concern in his eyes. His venomous gaze was like a blade, cutting me to the bone. In this new life, I stepped aside, letting Ethan save Luna. He sneered, "Emma, good thing you didn't stop me this time. Otherwise, I froze in shock. Could Ethan have also come back to life?" This time, luck was on Luna's side. After taking the medication and receiving CPR from Ethan, she gradually recovered. But Ethan wasn't as fortunate. Without his seatbelt fastened, the turbulence threw him high into the cabin, causing him to crash headfirst, rendering him unconscious. He suffered multiple fractures across his body, especially his hands. He became one of the critically injured. After 3 days of intensive care, Ethan was transferred to a regular hospital room. The doctor informed us that he was in a deep coma, and if he didn't wake up within 7 days, he would likely become a vegetable. Grace was in the hospital, wailing uncontrollably, blaming me for not keeping an eye on her son. She lunged at me, tugging at my clothes. "This is a sin. He's my only son, and I worked so hard to raise him. Emma, if anything happens to Ethan, you'll have to pay with your life." I couldn't help but laugh coldly. Ethan's father had passed away early, leaving Grace to raise him alone. But Ethan had always been brilliant, a top student who went on to pursue his PhD with ease. Grace always thought her son was a golden boy, too good for anyone, including me. Even though my mother was the hospital director and my father a renowned figure in the medical world, Ethan had only been able to become deputy director a few years after graduation by leveraging my family's influence. Still, Grace believed I wasn't worthy of her precious son. A crowd of onlookers had gathered, many pulling out their phones to record the scene. Not far away, the hospital room door was pushed open by a woman wearing a mask, bundled up tightly. That silhouette, I recognized it even in my nightmares. I grabbed Grace's hand and pointed at Luna. "Mrs. Sullivan, if you're looking for someone to pay for this, it shouldn't be me." That's the woman Ethan risked his life to save by unbuckling his seatbelt. He's in a coma now because of her. Luna froze in her tracks, then turned to flee. Grace stormed forward and delivered a sharp slap across her face. Masks and hats were ripped off with all their might, and Luna's face was exposed under the camera. "Luna, it's you," Grace clawed at Luna's face. "If my son doesn't wake up, I'll kill you. Are you crazy?" Luna screamed, her delicate face now filled with impatience and fury. "I never begged your son to save me. He decided to act like a lapdog all on his own, saw me upset, and rushed over without a second thought. How is any of that my problem? I even thought to come check on him out of kindness, but with you acting like this, forget it." Luna fled in a panic, leaving Grace to collapse onto the floor, her face full of resentment. Grace followed me into the hospital room. "I don't care, you're all responsible. If Ethan doesn't wake up, you'll all have to take care of him and me." I rolled my eyes and glanced at Ethan lying in the hospital bed. Still no improvement. His face was so bruised and swollen that he was almost unrecognizable. If he knew that the Luna he had risked everything to protect said such awful things, I wondered how he would feel. But for now, he was unconscious, oblivious to everything. I clicked my tongue in regret and was about to leave when I suddenly saw a thin, transparent human figure rise from the bed. I jumped back in fright, accidentally stepping on Grace's foot. "God, what are you doing stepping on me?" Grace snapped, shoving me. Her hand passed straight through Ethan's soul. She couldn't see him. I didn't dare stare directly either, only observing his ghostly figure out of the corner of my eye. Ethan looked shocked at first, then panicked, and finally ran over to me, waving his hand in front of my face. "Emma, can you see me?" I could actually hear him speak. Was it because I had been reincarnated? Pretending not to see or hear him, Ethan looked disappointed and sat back down by the bed, muttering to himself. "Luna, I wonder how Luna is doing. This time, did I manage to protect her? Why hasn't she come to see me yet?" When I arrived at the hospital room as an intern, Grace, who had been keeping vigil for several nights, was already exhausted and slumped over the bedside asleep. Ethan sat next to his mother, muttering under his breath. "My mom is this worn out, and Emma still hasn't come to take turns keeping watch. What kind of girlfriend is she anyway? She can't even share hardships." The more he spoke, the darker his expression grew, probably assuming no one could hear him, so he let all his selfish thoughts spill out. If it weren't for her constantly using her parents to pressure me, why would I even be with a woman like her? She's as stiff as a brick, completely lacking in tenderness. Not like Luna when she cries, she can melt your heart into a puddle. If Emma hadn't interfered, Luna and I would have been together long ago. Luna wouldn't have. Even though I had no expectations left for Ethan, hearing such words still chilled my heart. So in Ethan's eyes, my pursuit of him in the previous life, and even my parents' help, had merely been a form of coercion. If it weren't for my parents' influence, how could he have become the youngest deputy director in the city? In my previous life, he had always acted attentive and sincere whenever my parents were around. But he had no gratitude in his heart. My hatred boiled. But I kept my face expressionless as I recorded Ethan's condition. Clicking the pen shut, I turned to leave. Just then, Luna burst in with a group of staff, loudly announcing her presence. "I'd like to clarify some rumors circulating online recently. I'm very grateful for Mr. Ethan's help that day, but the claims about us being in a relationship are completely unfounded. Back in school, Mr. Ethan did pursue me, but we never dated. I didn't expect that running into him on a flight that day would lead to." Luna shed a single crocodile tear, looking pitiful to an extreme. Ethan, however, looked as though he'd been struck by lightning, frozen in place. Then he lunged forward and tried to grab Luna's arm, only to clutch at air. "Luna, what are you saying? What do you mean we never dated? You even carried my child once." Seeing him so shattered filled me with a certain dark satisfaction. At that moment, Luna, ever the actress, grasped Grace's hand with feigned sincerity. "Ma'am, I'm truly grateful for Ethan's help. If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to reach out to me in the future." Grace stared at her before suddenly clawing at Luna's face. "Luna, about Ethan's surgery fees." Luna's expression froze for a moment. "Of course, don't worry, I'll cover it entirely." Grace pushed further. And since Ethan got hurt protecting you, surely you could stay and keep watch over him for a few nights, couldn't you? Luna hesitated, her face showing a trace of difficulty. I can arrange for someone to stay with him. However, the live stream comments were already flooding in, calling Luna fake and accusing her of putting on an act. Forced by public opinion, Luna could only nod in agreement. I was merely there to observe the drama, but Grace suddenly turned to me, pointing a finger, and under the glare of numerous cameras, decided to make me her target. "Ethan's girlfriend, aren't you?" Grace declared with an air of authority. "You two will be getting married soon anyway. Why not use this opportunity to learn how to take care of Ethan properly? Better to get some practice in now than mess it up later." She didn't stop there. "You and Luna can take turns doing the night shifts." Her tone made it sound like this was the most natural thing in the world. I couldn't help but laugh in exasperation. "Grace, I must have forgotten to mention Ethan and I broke up." Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief. "Broke up? Who agreed to that? And when did this happen?" Grace's voice shot up several octaves. "Are you seriously thinking of abandoning Ethan now, just because he's unconscious? That's shameless. He's only temporarily in a coma. Once he wakes up, his future will still be bright as ever. Don't you dare regret this later." Ethan, even in his semi-transparent ghost form, looked like he was about to explode. His spirit flickered visibly, growing fainter by the second. "Emma, when you see Luna and me living happily in the future, don't you dare come crawling back, saying you love me." I turned and walked away, ignoring the cameras still trained on me. In my heart, I felt a newfound sense of freedom, boundless skies, and open seas. This time, I was giving him the freedom he truly deserved. Luna stayed behind to look after Ethan, while Grace returned home for some rest. Not long after, a coworker approached me. "Emma, your boyfriend, oh, sorry, your ex-boyfriend, he's in a pretty rough spot. That Luna girl, isn't she some minor social media influencer? She gained a bit of fame after the plane crash. She showed up today with her team, and I thought she genuinely wanted to help. Turns out, she was just there for clout. Apparently, Ethan had an accident and wet himself. They asked her to help clean up, and she rolled her eyes and said, 'Not my problem.'" My coworker clicked their tongue in disapproval. "Poor guy risked his life to save hers, and this is how she repays him." I didn't say a word, but as I passed Ethan's hospital room, I noticed the door was wide open. Inside, Luna was busy posing for her camera. "This place reeks of piss," she said, pinching her nose and fanning the air dramatically. But as soon as the camera lens was on her, she plastered on a bright smile. She even went so far as to prop Ethan up, her movements careless and rough. The IV needle in his hand got yanked, causing a spurt of blood to splatter. "Unfazed," she said, "they told me comatose patients need to be repositioned regularly to prevent bed sores. I thought I'd use this chance to record a little instructional video for everyone. I even studied how to do this properly." The moment the camera stopped rolling, she let go, letting Ethan fall back onto the bed with a thud. "Is that enough footage?" she asked impatiently. "I can't stand it anymore, it stinks in here. If it weren't for maintaining my image, do you think I'd even bother coming to the hospital? And now I'm stuck covering all his medical expenses. What bad luck, I never asked him to save me." Ethan's ghost stood frozen in disbelief, his expression a mixture of shock and heartbreak. With every word Luna spoke, his spirit grew fainter and fainter. Then, as if to seal the deal, Luna kicked the bed frame hard and cursed. "Serves you right who told you not to wear your seatbelt. Don't blame me for your stupidity." Suddenly, Ethan's ghost disappeared entirely. But on the hospital bed, his finger twitched ever so slightly. Ethan woke up. I was dragged to his room by Marcus, my mentor, and the attending physician. The room was packed with people, buzzing with excitement. Luna was there too. She was the first to rush forward, dragging her film crew along as she plastered herself to Ethan's side, acting overly affectionate. "Ethan, you're finally awake," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with emotion. "You have no idea how worried I've been this whole time. I've been taking turns with Grace to look after you. I even lost weight from all the stress." She pouted pitifully but quickly put on a brave face. "But it's okay, I don't mind the hardship at all. You saved me, risking your life in the process. Anything I do for you is worth it." She looked like a delicate flower, blooming courageously despite the odds, as if carrying Ethan's burdens on her fragile shoulders. If I hadn't seen the truth with my own eyes, I might have been convinced. Luna held Ethan's hand tightly. But in the next moment, Ethan abruptly pulled his hand away. He turned his head aside, his expression icy. "Luna, I don't want to see you. Please leave." Luna's face paled in panic. What? "Ethan, did I do something wrong?" Tears welled up in her reddened eyes, spilling over in perfect, dramatic fashion. On her live stream, the comment section exploded. "What's wrong with Ethan? She's been taking care of him tirelessly, and this is how he treats her. Poor Luna, she's been through so much, and this jerk has the nerve to act like this." Ethan, of course, couldn't exactly explain to everyone that he had spent the past weeks as a disembodied spirit, watching Luna's true colors unfold. That kind of revelation would land him in a psych ward. His face darkened, and he hastily made up an excuse. "I don't feel well with so many people here. I just want some peace and quiet." Marcus frowned. "The patient has just regained consciousness. He needs rest." Hearing this, Grace quickly began ushering everyone out of the room, shooing them away like a flock of ducks. The camera captured every step of Luna's reluctant departure, her gaze lingering longingly over her shoulder. Almost everyone's heart ached for this delicate flower, Stella. I turned to leave, but Ethan suddenly called out to me, "Emma, can we talk?" "No." I didn't even look back. After Ethan woke up, I never visited his hospital room again. On the rare occasion we crossed paths in the corridor, I would quickly dodge out of sight, pretending not to see him. Even so, thanks to my gossip-loving coworker, I was well informed about his situation. Apparently, Grace, his mother, had set up a social media account for him. His heroic act of saving someone during the plane crash earned him a surge of followers. However, the attention was polarizing. For every supporter, there seemed to be just as many critics. One time, Luna came to the hospital to see him, my coworker said, taking a bite of her snack. Somehow, the two of them ended up sparking a fake online romance. Believe it or not, it actually gained them more fans. "It's become a bit of a fairy tale," she added, clearly peeved on my behalf. "If I didn't know you were his actual ex-girlfriend, I might have rooted for them myself." A youthful, mutual crush, reuniting years later on a plane, surviving a crash together, and rekindling their love. It's the stuff of novels. I didn't care about any of it. I threw myself into my studies instead. In my previous life, I excelled academically, consistently earning scholarships. Back then, Marcus, my mentor, had once said I had the potential to become one of the leading surgeons of my generation, someone who could truly make a difference. But after marrying Ethan, I gave it all up to become a homemaker. While Ethan was busy building his career, I managed our household. I set aside my dream of being a doctor. Marcus was deeply disappointed and stopped staying in touch. Even the New Year's gifts I sent him were returned unopened. I thought my sacrifice would lead to a happy and fulfilling life together. I never imagined that Ethan not only harbored no love for me, but resented me deeply. Now that I had a second chance, I was determined to focus entirely on my own future. When I finally sought Marcus out, I was startled to find Ethan there as well. Suppressing my disgust, I handed over a gift. Marcus raised an eyebrow and chuckled. "So, you two split up, huh?" I was about to confirm it when Ethan suddenly pulled me close, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. "We just had a fight. Emma hasn't forgiven me yet." To my shock, he stood up, got down on one knee, and proposed right there in front of Marcus. "Emma, I've thought about this for a long time. I can't imagine my life without you. All these years, we've supported each other and had a great relationship. But these past few weeks without you have left me feeling empty, like something's missing. Now, with Marcus here as our witness, I want to seize this moment to propose to you. Emma, will you marry me?" He looked up at me, brimming with confidence, as if certain that I couldn't possibly say no. The ring he held was small, barely 3 carats, with a plain design and no embellishments. Simple to the point of stinginess, it reminded me of the past. Ethan's family wasn't well off, but he had saved up to buy me a 3-carat diamond ring back then. I was so moved, I cried. He had been clueless about romance, but had gone to great lengths to make his proposal special, with balloons, roses, and even a tiara. I truly believed he would cherish me like a princess for the rest of my life. Without hesitation, I had said yes, walking willingly into the graveyard of marriage. I even told him to focus on his career while I took care of everything at home, dedicating myself to being the perfect wife. Yet my devotion became his weapon to manipulate me. My dreams of a happy life were nothing but illusions, shattered into a blade that pierced me deeply and twisted cruelly. Now, Ethan reached out to slip the ring onto my finger, but I slapped it away. It tumbled to the ground, rolling several times before disappearing into a crack. Ethan's expression darkened instantly. "Emma, what's the meaning of this? How long are you going to keep this up?" He stood abruptly, his tone sharp with frustration. "Yes, Luna and I were together once, but that's all in the past. If you're upset about the rumors online, those were just PR stunts my mom agreed to. For you, I can delete the account entirely." He spoke as though he were making some grand sacrifice, even daring to question me. "I always thought you were the sensible type. What's gotten into you this time?" Marcus had tactfully excused himself to the kitchen, leaving us alone. I remained seated, calmly unpacking the gift I had brought for Marcus. Without turning around, I replied coldly, "Ethan, we're done?" "I'm not joking." Ethan grabbed my arm. "Done? I never agreed to that." I stopped what I was doing and turned around. My calm and resolute eyes fixed on Ethan, and I spoke each word deliberately. "Ethan, if you were given another chance, if you already knew what kind of person Luna really is, would you still choose to save her? What is the true duty of a doctor, the essence of life itself? I still haven't figured it all out, but I do know it's definitely not the way you do it, dressing up your selfishness in a cloak of selflessness and supreme morality. Just because you wear a silk robe doesn't mean there aren't fleas underneath. You are unworthy of being a doctor." Ethan's face turned pale, and he staggered back several steps, leaning against the cold wall. Suddenly, a realization dawned upon him. His expression was complicated as he looked at me. "Emma, you also?" "Yes." "So Ethan, I'm no saint. I won't just forgive you." Ethan left early, and Marcus didn't ask many questions. He simply placed a human anatomy model in front of me. Its joints, pressure points, and organs seemed to be in their rightful places, timeless and unchanged. But Marcus said, "What textbooks teach you is never everything." It's like how no one initially knew that some people could have their hearts on the right side or that others could have two uteruses. The models only show the most basic and common phenomena, just like the golden ratio being 0.618. But not everything is designed with the golden ratio. Even these things we take for granted can deviate, so the question you're asking has even less of a definitive answer. A doctor's duty is to save lives, but whether to sacrifice oneself to save others, that's a personal choice. And every choice deserves our respect. Marcus poured a cup of tea, sliding it gently in front of me, smiling warmly. "Emma, if you haven't figured out your answer yet, don't rush. You've got a long life ahead of you, plenty of time to think it through." I suddenly remembered the afternoon when I received my graduate exam scores and read a news article online. A sudden earthquake had shattered the peace of a small town, causing buildings to collapse into massive crevices. Countless injured people lay groaning amidst the ruins. In a distant city, teams of medical workers were preparing to head to the disaster zone. That time, Marcus was leading the team. Despite the aftershocks continuing, they signed pledges and wrote farewell letters. They were prepared to risk their lives to give those trapped a chance at survival. During a brief work break, a sweat-soaked reporter managed to grab Marcus for a 10-second interview. Pulling down her mask, her face bore deep indentations from the mask, blistered skin, and a look of worry. "I don't have much time to talk. I just hope my team can all return safely." Then she went back to the rescue efforts, working tirelessly day and night. My parents had chosen Marcus as my mentor, but before that, I had hesitated to follow her. After reading that article, I sent Marcus a heartfelt and sincere email, expressing my wish to be her student. In the days that followed, I joined her on many battlefields, big and small. But later, I became trapped in the small world of family. I had forgotten that my heart once beat passionately for the duty of saving lives. The next time I saw Ethan was at the hospital. I was delivering some documents to the chief when I happened to see them talking privately. The chief looked troubled. "Ethan, it's not that we don't want you back. It's just that, after a comprehensive evaluation, your current condition isn't suitable for returning to surgery, especially not for performing operations. You know how important a doctor's hands are. And now, how about this? We can transfer you to logistics. How does that sound?" Upon hearing this, Ethan's face immediately darkened. He raised his hand and swept all the documents off the chief's desk onto the floor. If the desk hadn't been so heavy, he might have flipped it over entirely. What do you mean by this? My abilities are evident to everyone. Putting me in logistics would be a waste of talent. Before I could laugh, the chief couldn't hold back and let out a chuckle. Twirling a pen, he smirked. Ethan, just because people praise you, you really think you're something special. Sure, your education is impressive, but in this hospital, throw a brick and you'll hit 2 Harvard grads. Do you think you got straight into the operating room and started consultations within 2 years because of your exceptional skills? As your senior, let me give you some advice. Since you're now with that influencer, what's her name, Luna? Focus on that life and make your money as internet celebrities. Without the backing of the Emerson family, you're nothing. This is reality. Ethan sneered, scoffing at the idea. What he thought had shackled and confined him was, in reality, his wings. Wings that allowed him to soar higher and higher without hesitation. Without them, no matter how high his starting point, he could only crash and burn. Ethan had always carried himself with pride. Hearing those words, especially with me still present, his face darkened instantly. He shot up in anger. Don't you dare underestimate me like that. I broke through medical barriers and tackled cutting-edge research with nothing but my own mind. I refuse to believe that without this position, I'm worthless. Logistics. Forget it, I quit. Without leaving himself any room to backpedal, Ethan stormed out. From my internship to assisting in surgeries as a lead surgeon, it didn't take me long. I poured all my energy into studying, picking up the knowledge I'd abandoned in a past life. Under Marcus's guidance, I also gained insights and experience he hadn't taught me before. My personal abilities were growing by the day, so much so that I had no time to check on Ethan's current situation. That is, until a colleague burst into the room, clutching their phone and urging me to go to the hospital entrance to see what was happening. That's when I learned that Grace, Ethan's mother, had caused a scene. With a group of supporters, she had unfurled a massive banner at the hospital entrance, accusing the hospital of being heartless. It claimed that the hospital had wronged Ethan, who'd injured his hand saving a patient, by dismissing him without empathy. The banner declared that the hospital had abandoned him once he was of no use, leaving him and his mother destitute, unable to even afford food. A colleague rolled their eyes and remarked, "That mother-son duo is downright gross." Not long ago, when they were still riding the wave of popularity, they teamed up with Luna to stir up drama and make a fortune. Now that their fame's fizzled out and no one buys their act anymore, they've turned their schemes on the hospital. Ethan soon arrived in a rush, trying to take Grace away. I initially thought he was sincere, but in front of a live streaming audience, he put on a performance fit for an Oscar. "Mom, please don't do this. My hand is no longer fit for surgery. Staying at the hospital would make me dead weight. Of course they wouldn't want me anymore." "It's fine. I'm still a healthy person, right? If I can't be a doctor, I can deliver food or drive for Uber. There are always ways to make money." In no time, the internet was flooded with sympathy for him and outrage against the hospital. I never imagined Ethan could be such a fragile little flower. Tusk. Infuriating. My parents suggested settling the matter by paying them off, but I couldn't swallow my anger. My mom placed her hand gently over mine. Think of it as spending money to see someone's true colors. We used to think Ethan was a decent kid, but how could he turn out to be so despicable? She shook her head, sighing. Thank goodness you broke up with him. If you'd stayed together and ended up with someone like him, your dad and I would have been heartbroken. My eyes stung, welling up with tears. In my past life, after my death, my parents had aged overnight, blaming themselves for not caring for me enough. When they discovered the truth, they sought vengeance on Ethan, going so far as to run him over, but they couldn't escape the law. They were imprisoned and spent the rest of their lives behind bars. They had sacrificed so much for me. In this lifetime, they were still worrying about me. No matter the timeline, their love for me remained unwavering. This time, I refused to stay silent. Ethan and Luna arranged to meet me at a cafe. They laid their terms down immediately. "I want $5 million, Luna said sweetly, her tone belying her ruthlessness. "Not a penny less." "And you?" I turned to Ethan, my voice cold. For some reason, he avoided my gaze, looking down at the table. After a moment of silence, he finally spoke. My demands are simple. Let me return to the hospital as a consulting doctor, and I want a guarantee that I'll never be reassigned to a logistics position for the rest of my life. I let out a dry chuckle. Who would have thought Ethan actually had career ambitions? I downed the rest of my coffee in one gulp and shrugged. Sorry, but neither of your demands are possible. Ethan, you know better than anyone that claiming the hospital betrayed you is absurd. The hospital never said they wanted to fire you. They merely wanted to prioritize patient safety. Since your hand injury made you unfit for surgeries, they had no choice but to reassign you to logistics. And yet, you turned around and bit the hand that fed you. How pathetic. I grabbed my bag and stood up, ready to leave. But Ethan caught me by the arm. Emma, listen to me. I don't need a dime, just let me go back to general surgery. His expression was frantic. Or I don't even need to operate. I can just handle outpatient consultations. As long as I can stay on the front lines. Ethan, have you lost your mind? Luna snapped suddenly, her high heels clacking as she kicked him hard. $5 million, that was the deal. I risked everything by using my most followed account to live stream for you, not a cent less. Ethan turned and shoved Luna away in frustration. Who would have thought that Luna couldn't keep her balance and fell backward? Her head slammed against the wall with a heavy thud. Clutching her chest, her face turned as pale as a sheet. Medicine, medicine? In that instant, a torrent of thoughts rushed through my mind. I thought about hatred, about responsibility, about human morality, and the value of life. The scale in my heart wavered back and forth until I remembered the vow I made when I became a doctor. To honor life, to treat everyone with equality and compassion. Even if a heinous criminal stood before me, I knew I had the duty to save them. Justice is the role of the law. In this society, everyone must play their part and uphold their professional ethics. I will always hold reverence for life. What are you standing there for? I shoved Ethan with a stern expression. Where's Luna's medication? Ethan hesitated. I couldn't wait. I knelt down and started performing CPR on Luna. Ethan remained motionless. He stood there as if he weren't a doctor. As if the patient lying on the ground wasn't the very woman he had once betrayed me to protect at all costs. How absurd. Luckily, I found her medication in the pocket of her coat. I tore it open and fed it to her. Pale-faced, Luna whispered slowly, Emma, don't think that just because you saved me, I'll let you off the hook. If it weren't for you pursuing Ethan back then, how would he have broken up with me and chosen you? He loved me. He just couldn't let go of your family's influence. Money and power, what gives you the right to be above others? Hearing these so-called truths again, my heart remained unfazed. I simply stuffed the pill bottle back into her bag and responded calmly. Luna, don't think that just because I saved you, I'll let you off the hook. The value of life is above all else, but the judgment of human morality is not the job of a doctor. I uncovered the surveillance footage, where Ethan refused the department head's offer to transfer to an administrative position. I paired it with the recording from my meeting with him and Luna. The two clips combined into a single, complete video. As a bonus, I added a detailed post, narrating the entire story from beginning to end with utmost clarity. Then I clicked send. In an instant, the internet erupted like a storm, with public opinion surging and chaos ensuing. Some condemned the hospital's integrity for being tarnished by two bad apples, cursing out Ethan and Luna. Others debated the boundaries of a doctor's responsibility, asking whether one should sacrifice themselves to save others. A poll was even launched. Opinions diverged, but I paid no further attention, because the moment I chose to save Luna, I already had my answer. Duty compelled me to save her, but morality compelled me to use the law to protect myself and seek justice against the wicked. Ethan and Luna were convicted of fraud and sentenced to prison. Luna not only lost access to her account with the company, but also faced a massive debt due to her breach of contract. As for Grace, Ethan's mother, she was sentenced to a year of probation for being an accomplice. Grace came to me 4 times, pleading for help. The last time, she even knelt before me on the street. Begrudgingly, I agreed to visit Ethan. In prison, he wore a drab jumpsuit and had a freshly shaved head. The moment he saw me, he leaped to the bars, gripping them tightly in agitation. Emma, save me? I know I was wrong. I was foolish, always deceived by Luna. I thought she was a kind person. I got stuck in my own stubbornness. I've spoken to a lawyer. If your family writes a letter of forgiveness, I might have a chance. I cut him off coldly. You called me here just to say this. His face contorted with regret, but his eyes remained murky and inscrutable. I knew then that he still hadn't truly awakened. Perhaps, in his mind, I was still the woman who would forgive him unconditionally, so long as he begged. That used to be true because I loved him, but now I no longer do. I hung up the phone and, through the thick glass, saw Ethan's hands clawing desperately at the wall as he let out a hopeless roar. After leaving the prison, Marcus called me. "Are you ready?" "My bags are packed, just waiting to head out." A few days ago, Marcus had emailed me an invitation. Bridging the last mile in healthcare, join us in Riverside Valley. It was an initiative inviting licensed healthcare workers to spend a year in a remote village, offering medical consultations and advice to the locals. As it happened, I had just secured my certification, so without a second thought, I signed up. My mother was against it. Why leave? You could stay here, hone your skills, publish research papers, and tackle medical challenges. That's every doctor's lifelong dream. I can help you achieve it faster. It was indeed a tempting offer, but I chose to embark on a different path. I aspire to become someone like Marcus. One day, I hope that the scalpel in my hand can firmly carve out a brighter future for the American healthcare system while gently embodying the warmth of life. End of the first story. Subscribe to my channel if you like my stories. Don't miss the second exciting story. Story 2. After 7 years of being trapped in this book's world, I finally completed my mission. As I prepared to leave the system and return to reality, I had completely given up trying to care. Ethan gave most of his paycheck to the heroine, and I respected and blessed them. He destroyed his career for Sophia, and I didn't cry or make a scene. But the man who had always been indifferent to me now confronted me with red-rimmed eyes. "Are you saying you don't care about me and Nat anymore?" he asked. I gave him a faint smile. "Oh, I'm about to go home. You can go to hell for all I care. How can you just leave like that? It took us so long to buy a house here in Miami, and now you're leaving?" Word had spread that Ethan was being transferred abroad. Nosy neighbors and curious onlookers alike had all come around. But little did they know, this transfer wasn't mandatory. It was something Ethan had applied for himself. For Sophia. After Sophia broke up with Lucas, the CEO of the conglomerate, she wanted to leave Miami. And just because of that, Ethan didn't hesitate to give up the promotion he had worked 10 years for. This lovesick second lead was completely devoted. At this moment, Ethan was sitting in the living room going through some documents while I returned after dealing with the neighbors. He took my grocery bag, pausing slightly. "Why did you buy so little?" His paycheck was already small to begin with. Not to mention, most of it went to Natalie every month. The Miami housing market was outrageously expensive. Buying this tiny apartment had used up nearly all our savings money I had painstakingly earned running an online shop. And now, after barely living here, we were selling it off. Without my meticulous budgeting, Ethan, who didn't understand real estate, was rushing to sell and would likely lose 40 of its value. I didn't say a word about it. Instead, I simply replied, "Living costs in Miami are too high." Ethan didn't comment further. He took the grocery bag into the kitchen to boil water and make dinner. A picture-perfect husband. Back in Boston, neighbors would gush over how wonderful Ethan was as a husband, saying how lucky I was to marry such a caring man. What they didn't see was me waking up early and staying up late running my online shop, racking my brains to develop new recipes to afford the down payment on the house. People always focused on men's achievements, praising Ethan for his career success and thoughtfulness toward his wife. When I first arrived in this world, I told myself Ethan treated me well, and I should be content. I needed to work hard to win his heart and change his tragic fate of dying for Sophia. I had been bound to the system and trapped in this melodramatic novel for over 7 years. Then, just yesterday, the system informed me that my mission was complete. The male and female leads mysteriously didn't end up together, and I had married Ethan in the process. In 5 days, I would finally go home. While eating dinner, Ethan said, "Sophia urgently needs money this month." About my paycheck, that's when I remembered it was payday. Apparently, this time I wouldn't see a single cent of it. Ethan, perhaps worried I would throw a tantrum like before, explained, "It's getting colder these days. Sophia needs some winter clothes. She's not like you. She's frail and really sensitive to the cold. I responded lightly, all right. Ethan looked surprised and cleared his throat. I'm glad you understand. Understand? I smirked inwardly. 7 years of wholehearted dedication had earned me a single word. Understanding. I used to worry endlessly about Ethan's lingering feelings for Sophia, desperately trying to keep them apart like a madwoman. But my efforts only made things worse. Apart from stirring up arguments, they were completely pointless. Late at night, Ethan announced he was heading to Sophia's place to keep her company. Tonight, though, he made a point to explain, Sophia is easily scared and doesn't like being alone at night. Naturally, I feel compelled to take care of her. Sophia's father had embezzled company funds and fled the country, taking the entire family into hiding. A loyal housekeeper had replaced Sophia with her own daughter, allowing Sophia to escape to Boston. As a child, Sophia had known Ethan, the wealthy heiress and the underprivileged boy. To Ethan, she was the unattainable flower on the mountaintop. He might not even realize it, but every time he mentioned Sophia, his tone softened noticeably. Thankfully, I no longer cared. Calmly interrupting him, I handed him the car keys. It's dangerous to drive this late. Just sleep at her place tonight. Seeing my understanding demeanor, he paused mid-step. Frowning, he asked, Are you trying to spite me? I smiled. At this point, I couldn't even remember when I had stopped getting upset. Was it the time Sophia had a fever, and Ethan left me stranded in a mall during my agonizing period cramps to care for her? Or the time he gave her my necklace because she said she liked it? Incidents like these were countless practically, a daily occurrence in our 5-year marriage. The first time, I was angry. The second time, disappointed. By the nth time, I felt nothing at all. I was certain that whatever relationship they shared was entirely irrelevant to me now. Yet Ethan's voice turned cold as he said, Do you know what happened last time you stopped me from going? She was nearly assaulted by someone following her home. He looked at me with accusatory eyes. It felt as though everything was my fault. While I no longer wanted to argue, I refused to shoulder this unnecessary blame. She's renting an apartment in an upscale neighborhood, surrounded by wealthy areas where crime is naturally high. If she doesn't install security cameras, how is that my responsibility? Ethan thought I didn't know. The truth was, he was spending a significant portion of his paycheck to cover Natalie's rent, all because he wanted to provide her with a quiet environment. He couldn't bear to let her live in a place like that. But he could bear to let me live in a remote, filthy, noisy neighborhood. To save money and avoid putting more financial pressure on him, I lived 2 hours away in the suburbs, sharing a bathroom with a family of 3. The money I saved, all of it went to subsidize Natalie. When I confronted him, Ethan defended himself without hesitation. Natalie is a young woman who wants to live in a nicer apartment. What's wrong with that? Can't you be more understanding? Don't you have any compassion? His favoritism was beyond extreme. Arguing with him was futile. I smiled and said, Take care and don't come back. Ethan was at a loss for words. He sighed and muttered, Don't be mad, I'll be back soon. I'd heard that I'll be back soon so many times I was numb to it. The first few times he said it, I naively stayed home, waiting for him. But every time, I ended up waiting until dawn. Ethan would say Natalie wasn't feeling well, and he needed to stay by her bedside to take care of her. Now, whenever he left, I simply locked the door and slept soundly through the night. It didn't matter. I was planning to leave anyway. Ethan, to hell with you. As I expected, he didn't come back that night. The next morning, as I stepped out, I overheard voices in the hallway. Did you hear about last night at Rosewood Heights? A guy got into a fight with a drunk to protect his girlfriend and injured his hand. If only my husband were that responsible. By noon, Ethan finally came home, his hand wrapped in a thick bandage. I glanced at him but couldn't be bothered to ask about his injury. In the past, even the smallest scratch on him would break my heart. Back then, I believed that love could be reciprocated. During our first year of marriage, Ethan would help me with housework. Though the chores were tedious, dividing them as a couple added some charm to daily life. Over time, he became preoccupied with spending romantic evenings with Natalie, while my hands grew rough and calloused from doing all the housework alone. After lunch, I changed clothes, grabbed my wallet, and prepared to go shopping. The system had told me that completing the task would allow me to take away someone I loved. I requested the system to change the reward to a cash bonus instead. The system agreed. Confidently, I planned my shopping route. Since the money couldn't be taken with me, I'd rather spend it on myself than let others benefit from it. As I approached the apartment complex's entrance, I noticed a group of thugs lingering nearby. Skillfully, I greeted them with a "Hey, boss," and handed them a bribe. Ethan was too busy entertaining Natalie to notice the harsh realities I faced living alone. While he and Natalie were indulging in their nights of bliss, I kept a fruit knife by my bedside, staring at the security monitor until dawn. Even her luxury neighborhood wasn't completely safe. A place like this was far worse. "Sophia," I suddenly heard Ethan's voice behind me. He hesitated, struggling to find the right words. "I took a day off today. I can go out with you and help you unwind." I was speechless. When we first moved to Atlanta, I had wanted Ethan's help looking for apartments, where we should buy a place, what furniture and appliances to get. All of that required his input. But he had refused repeatedly, claiming he was too busy with work to spare the time. Yet on that very same day, he took time off to go have dessert with Natalie. Fine, if he wanted to tag along, so be it. "It's been a while since we've gone shopping together," he said, his tone unusually gentle. For a moment, it felt like we were back in the days when we lived in our hometown. Back then, he'd always pick me up from work. If I got off early, he'd take me shopping. When I first arrived in the city, everything felt new and fresh to me, and Ethan patiently accompanied me as I explored every street and corner. Suddenly, someone shouted that there was a fire at Rosewood Heights. Ethan immediately let go of my hand and anxiously grabbed the person to ask for details. The person replied, "2 kids playing with fireworks set the storage room on fire." Ethan looked at me, seeming conflicted. "Go ahead. I'll head home on my own," I said calmly. I was no longer the person who couldn't live without him. Before leaving, his gaze lingered on me. "I promise I'll make it up to you next time." With only 5 days left, I wasn't about to waste my time on him. That day, Ethan unusually came home for lunch. Typically, at this hour, he'd be out having lunch with Natalie. I passed him without a glance. "Sophia," he suddenly snapped, his voice full of frustration. He rubbed his temples irritably. "You see I'm injured and don't even ask how I'm doing?" I rolled my eyes and pretended not to hear him. As my departure approached, I wanted to avoid unnecessary drama. I deliberately avoided crossing paths with him. Every day, I came home late. I waited for him to fall asleep before entering the house. At least the protection money I paid wasn't wasted. The thugs in this neighborhood left me alone. When Ethan heard about my plan to divorce, he scoffed and said, "It's about time." He sneered, "A guy like Lucas? How could a gorgeous girl like you end up with him?" I gave a faint smile and replied, "I was blind back then." For 3 consecutive days, Lucas and I didn't exchange a single word. I didn't bother asking about his whereabouts, nor did I care when he went to see Natalie. Sometimes, when I came home, he would try to talk to me, but I'd pretend to be asleep. Even with my eyes closed, I could feel him standing by my side for a long time. Time quietly slipped away. Suddenly, it was the second to last day. I went to a luxury boutique to pick up the sapphire bracelet I had pre-ordered. I had scheduled an appointment with the store manager, but when I arrived, he wasn't there. Nevertheless, the bracelet I had carefully selected was ready for me. Just as I was about to try it on to check the quality, someone snatched it away before I could. "Ethan, doesn't this look perfect on me?" Natalie's sweet, delicate voice matched her appearance. Her hands, meticulously cared for, made the sapphire gleam even more brilliantly against her fair skin. "You have the most beautiful hands," Ethan remarked, his tone flat yet filled with affection. "It does look lovely, but the price?" She hesitated. "If you like it, take it. I'll pay for it," Ethan replied without hesitation. The sales associate beamed with joy, ignoring me entirely as she showered the pair with compliments. "Sir, you're so good to your girlfriend." Natalie's cheeks flushed, and Ethan didn't deny it, though his ears turned slightly red. At that moment, our eyes met. Time seemed to freeze. They stood side by side. She wore a cream-colored dress, youthful and radiant, while he appeared poised and charismatic. They were the picture-perfect couple. No wonder the sales associate mistook them for being together. "Sophia," Ethan's expression turned uneasy as he stammered, I happen to have the day off today. We'll talk when we get home, I replied lightly, ignoring him. My tone was effortless, calm. Sorry, but this bracelet is mine. Perhaps you can find another design for her. The sales associate suddenly remembered. Oh yes, the store manager did mention this bracelet was already reserved. Natalie's eyes reddened. Is that so? This bracelet just reminded me of my mom. Well, since it's yours, I shouldn't covet it, she said, carefully removing the bracelet. Just then, Ethan stopped her. He looked at me, as though struggling to find the right words. 7 years together, and I instantly understood his intentions. Sure enough, he said, let Natalie have it. I'll get you another one. Standing behind Ethan, Natalie's tear-filled eyes glimmered with a trace of triumph. Her voice quivered as she murmured, Don't worry about me. I don't want to upset Sophia. Ethan's face was full of concern as he pulled out his credit card, ready to pay. We'll take this one. Is double the price okay? The sales associate looked at me hesitantly. I maintained a neutral expression and said, No. Ethan frowned, silently warning me with his gaze, Don't be stubborn. You can pick out something else. I shook my head again. Seeing that I refused to budge, frustration flashed across his face as he blurted out, Why do you have to compete with Natalie? Besides, the bracelet doesn't suit you anyway. In that instant, the atmosphere in the store froze. I glanced down at my hands rough and weathered. 7 years turned me from a carefree college student into a worn-out housewife. Even after her family's downfall, Natalie still had maids to look after her. As for me, I was nothing more than free labor trapped by the system. I fought back tears not because Ethan's words hurt me, but because I realized how these 7 years had been wasted. What a pity. I should have been writing papers, joining clubs, traveling, and exploring the world. Ethan realized his mistake and tried to explain, Sophia, that's not what I meant. He stepped closer to me, but Natalie tugged at his sleeve, holding him back. Ethan, Natalie doesn't even want it anymore. I had already composed myself and interrupted her. I'll sell it to you. For 5 times the price. With 5 times the price, I could buy my mom something even better. This bracelet had already left a bad taste in my mouth. For some reason, Ethan seemed hesitant as he handed over his card. I smirked, Don't tell me you can't afford it. Ethan shot me a look, handed the card to the sales associate, and fell silent. After I secured the payment receipt, the store manager returned. Upon hearing the situation, he immediately apologized and started recommending other products to me. Natalie, clutching the bracelet, tried to pull Ethan away, but he didn't move. She called his name again, snapping him out of his daze. Even so, he remained rooted in place, staring directly at me. On the way home, there was a considerable distance between Ethan and me. Several times, he tried to walk closer, but I subtly avoided him. Earlier, he had told Natalie to take a cab home while he waited for me outside the store. How rare. He sighed and said, Today was the anniversary of Natalie's parents' passing, so I accompanied her to the cemetery. On the way back, we passed the mall and she wanted to take a look inside. Don't be unreasonable. I nodded and replied, All right. Ethan swallowed the rest of his words, leaving them stuck in his throat. I didn't pay much attention to his rambling. His voice was like the annoying buzz of a mosquito. I was busy planning in my head tomorrow's the last day. The store manager mentioned that a limited edition bracelet would arrive tomorrow. I need to make time to check it out, and hopefully, I'll pick the best one. But deep down, I know that no matter what I bring home, my mom will be thrilled. She'll surely say I'm wasting money while proudly showing it off to everyone. The thought made me smile. Ethan noticed my smile and paused, visibly caught off guard. He wanted to say something more, but I had already left him behind. Too tired, let's talk about it another day, I said. That night, Ethan and I lay on the same bed. Even though we were the closest people to each other, we felt like strangers. In the darkness, Ethan's hand reached across the space between us, gently wrapping around me. I pretended to shift my position, moving farther away from him. His hand froze awkwardly in midair. Sophia, what's wrong with you? I'd rather you go back to the way you used to be arguing with me, shouting at me. I rolled my eyes and soon fell asleep. The last day, early in the morning, just as I woke up, the system appeared. It was a glowing orb that only I could see. It reconfirmed my mission's completion, ensuring that Ethan wouldn't die because of Natalie. Then, it notified me that the countdown had begun 5 hours left. Please, host, make sure to handle all matters in the real world, it said. I got up and turned to find Ethan already awake, his vacant gaze fixed on the ceiling. 7 years ago, when I first arrived in this world, I went straight to Ethan and told him I was a trans-dimensional traveler, here to save him. Of course, he didn't believe me. He thought I was crazy. When I accurately described his life experiences, he assumed I was some kind of scam artist. Later, when I was left wandering the streets and almost fell into danger, Ethan took me in. The system had told me that Ethan had a soft heart. I was thrilled. But back then, I didn't realize Ethan's kindness wasn't reserved for just me. And kindness isn't the same as love. I mistook his kindness for affection, and I began pouring my heart out to him. The system warned me that the greatest taboo for people like me was developing genuine emotions. I wasn't foolish. I knew to be wary. But not long after, the system said it would reluctantly allow me to fall for my mission target. Apparently, a legendary master strategist from another world had broken the rules by falling in love with their target and succeeded. The system had compromised, adding an option in the mission rewards that allowed me to take my true love with me. I was thrilled. I thought, how lucky I am that he's a kind and sincere man. Eventually, Ethan and I got married. There was no dreamlike wedding photo, no grand ceremony, but I was still content. Back then, Ethan asked me where my family lived. I didn't know how to explain, so I told him it was far away. He thought I didn't want to tell him, and his expression dimmed. He didn't push further, he only gave a quiet, disappointed hum. Time's running out. Let me take you to visit my family, I said with a smile. His eyes lit up as he pulled me into an embrace. That's wonderful, I can't wait to meet your family, he said. Your family is my family. That wish, unfortunately, was never going to come true. Ethan left for a company meeting. After he was gone, I transferred my little market stall to a kind lady who had often helped me with business. I even handed over the exclusive recipe I'd created. I donated all my unused clothes to charity. I meticulously went through the apartment to ensure I erased any trace of myself. When I visited the jewelry store that day, the manager was already waiting for me at the door. Noticing my choice of mature styles, he asked tentatively, "Is this for your mother?" "Yes, I'm preparing to head home," I answered casually. Behind me, hurried footsteps approached. I turned to see Ethan standing there, his face pale and almost ghostly. He silently watched me pick out the jewelry. His suit was wrinkled, his tie askew. It looked like he had rushed straight from the meeting room. He stood beside me, his expression dark, his hand in his pants pocket trembling uncontrollably. I focused intently on comparing the different designs. The sales associate recognized Ethan and greeted him warmly. "Oh, Mr. Ethan, you're back. Did your girlfriend like the bracelet you picked yesterday?" Ethan replied coldly, "She's not my girlfriend." The associate awkwardly backed away, muttering under her breath, "Wow, that changed fast." I spent all my savings on the most exquisite bracelet. When Ethan saw me swiping my card, his pupils contracted sharply. His voice trembled as he said, "Don't worry about the money, I'll figure something out later." Did he think I was being reckless with spending? "When we get to Denver, let's go shopping together, all right?" I said. The company had already finalized Ethan's transfer to the Denver branch next month. Denver was a small city with modest economic conditions. But Ethan insisted on taking the job there, not because of the memories we shared, but because Denver was Natalie's hometown. He chose to accompany Natalie back to her hometown to settle down. The salary at the branch office was less than a third of what he earned at headquarters. I had no idea how he planned to deal with the financial situation. Casually, I said, "Sure, that's fine." He had made me too many promises before, and broken just as many. I didn't want to argue before leaving. For the sake of keeping things civil, I left it at that. He should understand. After all, he had always been reasonable. Hearing my words, he looked visibly relieved, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He even reached out, trying to hold my hand. "Sophia," the system interrupted just then, 2 hours remaining. His hand froze in midair, but he still insisted on taking my hand. "What do you feel like having for lunch?" "Let me cook for you. Too bad we wouldn't make it to lunch." 7 years ago, I had traveled back in time at exactly 11 a.m., just as I stepped onto my college campus for the first time. So today, I would be leaving at the same time. I thought for a moment and then replied, I'd like something like rice with braised chicken. After registering at school, I'd planned to go try the restaurant with my mom. The upperclassmen had said the one near the campus entrance was authentic. Ethan looked puzzled. What kind of dish is that? I wasn't interested in explaining. After all, I wouldn't be eating with him. Since I didn't answer, he continued to mumble to himself, "It's made with chicken, right? I can try to learn how to make it. We can go to the grocery store to buy the ingredients." I gave him a meaningful look. He suddenly realized he'd said something wrong, and his expression stiffened. There was still chicken in the refrigerator. There was no need to buy more. Obviously, he had already gone home and discovered that I had emptied the fridge. I had bought all those groceries, so rather than let him use them, I gave them away. He looked like a drunk who didn't want to face reality. Then he added, "And I'll grab you a box of peanut brittle while we're out." He had forgotten I was allergic to peanuts. Peanut brittle was Natalie's favorite. I chuckled softly. Sure. That made things easier. The system reminded me again. 1 hour remaining. I watched him bustling around the kitchen. Earlier, he had dragged me back to the house against my will. He had taken off his suit jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his dress shirt. Hot oil splattered onto the back of his hand, instantly creating blisters. He clenched his teeth and bore it without a sound. Sweat poured down his forehead, but he forced a smile. Just a little longer. It'll be ready soon. But he had no idea how to make braised chicken. In the end, he brought out a plate of soy braised chicken. Hiding his burnt hand behind his back, he looked at me with anticipation. "Try it. Does it taste like what you wanted?" Just then, Natalie's voice came from outside the door. "Are you home? Why didn't you come see me yesterday?" To my surprise, he didn't rush to Natalie's side like he usually would. I stared at him in shock. He pursed his lips and said, "Not just yesterday. I won't be going again, not anymore. You don't actually need me to take care of you." Natalie froze, clearly not expecting him to say such a thing. "Did your sister tell you to stay away from me? Did she misunderstand our relationship?" Before she could finish, Ethan cut her off sharply. "It has nothing to do with her." Ethan glanced at me nervously. Natalie hesitated for a moment, then spoke again in a hurt tone. "But I'm scared, Ethan. The neighborhood I live in hasn't been safe lately. What if someone tries to hurt me?" Ethan responded coldly, "If it's unsafe, then move. Find a cheaper apartment and use the savings to hire a security guard." I couldn't help but laugh. So, he had known all along. Natalie's eyes widened in disbelief as she stared at him. "Ethan, are you really not going to care about me anymore?" Ethan lowered his gaze. His voice was icy. "Do I really have to spell it out for you? That day, I saw Lucas coming and going from your apartment. With him around, no one would dare mess with you. So that's how it was. The two of them had reconciled. No wonder Ethan had managed to restrain himself from visiting Natalie last night. But why was my mission still marked as complete? While I was pondering this, I heard Natalie urgently say, "Ethan, let me explain." Lucas and I could never be together. Seeing Ethan remain unmoved, Natalie became even more flustered. All these years, Lucas has never had feelings for me. The women around him, his so-called friends, assistants, they're all waiting to pounce on me. I mean nothing to him. She suddenly stopped mid-sentence, as if trying to confirm something. She quickly turned to Ethan. "But I'm different to you, right? I'm your enough." Ethan cut her off abruptly. It was the first time he had spoken to Natalie so harshly. "Just leave. Don't come back. To me, you're just a regular friend. The only person in my heart is Sophia." After saying that, Ethan closed the door. He returned to the dining table, stealing a nervous glance at me. "Hurry, eat before it gets cold." I didn't touch my fork. "I don't want to eat. I need to save some room for dinner tonight." After tasting Ethan's cooking, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to stomach anything else later. Seeing me hesitate, the light in Ethan's eyes gradually dimmed. "Is it not to your liking? I'll redo it for you." He suddenly stood up. I said, "There's no chicken left in the fridge." He replied, "Then I'll go buy some. Wait here, I'll be back to make it fresh." "There's no time." I stared intently at his evasive gaze. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy. Ethan froze in place entirely. If it weren't for the sound of his breathing, I might have thought the world had come to a halt. Looking at his handsome face, memories of the past 7 years flashed through my mind. Falling in love at 18 was too early for me. I was young, inexperienced, and easily swept into blind infatuation. Of course, maybe there was a bit of dependency mixed in as well. During that time, Ethan was my only pillar of support here. If I'd been in my original world, the first time he upset me, I might have just broken up with him. I'd have called up my new college friends to hit a bar, sipped on cocktails while listening to love songs, shed a few pretend tears, and moved on. So all this talk about strategies and trapped in a book scenarios, it's basically like being kidnapped. They sever 18 years of your social ties, throw you into an unfamiliar world with nothing, and expect you to fend for yourself. Falling for Ethan back then wasn't so much about true love as it was about self-consolation. I loved him, so I felt I had to save him. I told myself I chose this. I loved him. But from the start, our relationship was never equal. I depended on him to survive. When I realized I no longer had feelings for Ethan, even the friendly neighbors I'd come to know tried to persuade me. Which man doesn't have his flaws these days? It's just a matter of time. At least Ethan has a promising future. It's better to come to terms with it now than later, when he might start seeing someone else. They were right, I didn't belong here. Countdown to 60 seconds. Dimensional portal initializing. Congratulations, host, mission complete. Prepare for return. Ethan suddenly pulled me into a tight embrace. His body radiated heat as he held me firmly against him. Sophia, let's start over. This time, I promise I'll do better. The system's voice chimed in one last time. Host, confirm whether or not to bring your partner back to your original world. I answered firmly, no. Sophia, Ethan's eyes turned red as he stared at me. Don't leave. If you have to go, take me with you. He gripped my shoulders tightly. Don't leave me here alone. It was then I realized Ethan could hear the system's voice. The system explained after a brief check. The Bring Partner Along feature just launched, so there may be some glitches. When departing, the system may allow the host's partner to hear system notifications. This is the first case of a non-host partner hearing the system. Thank you for your feedback. We'll report this for repairs. The system continued its protocol, confirming transport of this world's special items. 1 pair of Cartier bracelets, 1 pair of Tiffany diamond earrings, 1 Bulgari necklace, 1 Piaget watch, 1 limited edition Chanel handbag. For 2 whole minutes, the system rattled off a list that sounded like a luxury shopping spree. Confirmed. I couldn't bring my partner back, but the luxury goods, no problem. Prepare for transport. Countdown begins. As the seconds ticked down, I locked eyes with Ethan. He seemed unable to accept the reality, tears dropping onto my face one by one. Sophia, stay. I reached out to ruffle his hair, just like in every tender moment we'd shared before. The gesture was soft and gentle, as if we were still in love. I thought about the first time I met Ethan. He was staring down at his phone in the elevator of an office building. On our first date, he kissed my forehead at a coffee shop. When I was fresh out of college, desperately job hunting, he'd looked at me with concern and said he'd take care of me from then on. These memories flashed before my eyes like a slideshow, vivid as if they'd happened yesterday. A glimmer of hope appeared in Ethan's eyes, but my next words shattered all his expectations. Ethan, we've shared something special. Let's part on good terms. Goodbye forever. 3, 2, 1, don't. Before he could finish, I disappeared from his embrace. As I crossed through dimensions, I could faintly hear his sobs. I didn't look back. With a pile of luxury goods on my back, I walked resolutely toward the light. I was finally going home. The end epilogue. The first time I met Sophia, it was a bright, sunny day. She suddenly stepped in front of me. Are you Ethan? She asked. Just call me Sophia. At that moment, I had just received a text from Natalie. She was venting, complaining about a particularly obnoxious rich kid. She'd met a guy who flaunted his family's wealth and acted like no one mattered to him. It was supposed to be a casual check-in text to me, but she'd spent most of it ranting about that guy, Lucas. I'd grown up an orphan, raised by my uncle. I learned to be independent a long time ago. I could sense that Natalie had a budding fondness for Lucas. It left me with a whirlwind of emotions. But I quickly suppressed those unnecessary feelings. That was when Sophia appeared. She told me she wanted to change my destiny. My mind was preoccupied with thoughts of Natalie, so I brushed her off with a few casual remarks and sent her away. She was persistent and came back to find me again. I rejected her once more. She looked about the same age as Natalie, but had a completely different personality. She was nothing like a refined young lady. The next time we met, she was almost harassed by two thugs. I stepped in just in time to save her. She threw her arms around me, crying uncontrollably, not an ounce of restraint. For some reason, I ended up taking her to my place. Through her tears, she kept saying strange things. "You saved me, so I'll save you too." She started working for me, but she didn't know how to do anything. I guessed she must have been some rich heiress. How else could someone be so clueless about basic life skills? She worked with focus and determination, though. Even when her hands got scratched or calloused, she never complained. But when she realized I was even skimping on money for books, she held my hand and cried for a long time. She then began exploring breakfast business ideas. Her ideas were always imaginative and out of the box. At first, her breakfast stand didn't do well and was met with hostility from other vendors in the area. But at the time, I wasn't in the mood to comfort her. Natalie had returned home. I heard the news from a friend, but I never received any word from her. I was on edge, and when Sophia kept rambling about new product ideas, I found myself growing irritated. I snapped at her. She froze for a moment, then pouted and walked away. I felt a little guilty, but I knew she would cheer herself up soon enough and didn't need me to coax her. Her sandwich stall still struggled to attract customers. Until one day, a wealthy young man happened to stop by. He found her sandwiches intriguing, tried one, and couldn't stop praising them. He even tipped her generously. The young man came back several days in a row. Not only did Sophia start earning decent money, but her business also began to pick up. People grew curious what was so special about these fruit sandwiches that even social media influencers were recommending them. Meanwhile, I still couldn't get in touch with Natalie. I eventually managed to get the contact information for her assistant and called. Before I could even speak, the assistant dismissed me impatiently, saying, "Miss Natalie is very busy lately and not seeing visitors." I refused to believe this was Natalie's own decision. I stood there for a long time, convincing myself that she must have her reasons. Walking home slowly, I passed by Sophia's stand. I saw that same wealthy young man chatting with her. He said, "Selling these sandwiches for $10 each is way too cheap. I think they should go for $100. Sophia didn't even hesitate and replied, "Sure." But then she only charged him $100 while keeping the price at $10 for everyone else. When the young man realized this, he was both amused and exasperated. "I'm trying to help you. Selling them at $10 is a loss for you. With such low prices, you've upset quite a few competitors. People are talking behind your back." Sophia shrugged it off. "Let them talk. I've said worse things about them behind their backs anyway." The young man was at a loss for words, but he kept coming back every day, nearly setting up camp at her stand. For some reason, I couldn't quite describe the feeling it stirred in me. That was when Natalie suddenly showed up at my door, tears streaming down her face. It turned out that wealthy young man was Lucas. Between sobs, Natalie explained that Lucas had come back with her for a relaxing trip, but he had been disappearing every day. Later, I discovered that Lucas had been frequenting a certain breakfast stand. Natalie's friend tried to comfort her, saying, "Stop crying. That girl is just a sandwich vendor. How could she possibly compare to you?" Natalie shook her head gently. "You've misunderstood. I'm worried that Lucas has become a target for a con artist. He's the heir to a fortune, and there are too many women trying to get close to him. That sandwich girl's background is so mysterious. Ethan, do you know anything about her?" She turned her gaze to me as she spoke. So that's why she had come to me. I saw right through her intentions, but I didn't call her out on it. It's normal for girls to have their little schemes. Unfortunately, I couldn't give her an answer, because I knew nothing about Sophia's background either. All I knew was her name. Maybe, as she claimed, she was just a little fairy who had descended from the heavens. At that thought, I couldn't help but smile. After Natalie left, I stood outside my apartment building for a long time. Her words echoed in my mind. "Ethan, you're living together. Are you really saying nothing has happened between you two? Don't get me wrong, I just think you two actually make a good match, don't you?" She was right. A mysterious girl from out of town and a penniless orphan. They did seem like a good match. I let out a bitter laugh. I knew that Sophia had a special affection for me. At such a young and passionate age, and living under the same roof day in and day out, I was much more mature than her, and I understood how to restrain my feelings. When I realized it, I tried to avoid being alone with her, which left her feeling down for quite a while. As the sun set, Sophia appeared, pushing her sandwich cart. Her petite frame struggled with the heavy cart. Yet in the glow of the evening sky, she looked radiant. When she saw me, she waved excitedly. She thought I was waiting downstairs for her, and her excitement was palpable. I suddenly wondered, if I were truly with Sophia, would Nat be jealous? The way I had once been jealous of her liking Lucas, I ended up being with Sophia. The happiest person was Sophia. The second happiest wasn't me, it was Nat. Because I made Sophia keep her distance from Lucas. Sophia immediately agreed and even gave up one of her biggest clients. Someone like Lucas, a wealthy scion, wouldn't bother coming back after being treated coldly a few times. Soon, Lucas returned to Harbor City. Nat left too. Life returned to its usual calm. But sometimes, when Sophia leaned against me, I'd lose myself in thought, feeling like everything was a dream. Was I really with her? As she sweetly nestled against me, I couldn't help but wonder how Nat was doing. Time passed just like that. We spent summers at the beach and winters skiing, and life was pretty happy. After Sophia opened her breakfast shop, our quality of life improved significantly. It had been ages since Nat last messaged me. Until one day, she sent me a text, telling me she was engaged to Lucas. The night I saw that message, I was dazed for a long time. And then, I proposed to Sophia. I casually said, "Will you marry me?" The moonlight fell on Sophia's flushed face. She gave the answer I was hoping for. "Yes," she agreed immediately. I smiled. "See, Nat, you didn't want me, but someone else cherishes me." Sophia shyly took my hand. She told me that in her hometown, proposals involved kneeling on one knee and passing a test from her best friend. So, at her insistence, I solemnly asked again, "Sophia, will you marry me?" She replied just as seriously, "I will." Ethan, my real name is. I didn't catch it as I had already passed out drunk. It was a simple proposal. I didn't even prepare a ring, assuming she wouldn't notice. She didn't doubt me in the slightest. She trusted me completely. Once again, I wondered if she truly fell from the heavens. She said that when the time was right, she'd take me back to her hometown. Her words melted my heart, but I never imagined that day would never come. I worked hard to prepare for graduate school. I wanted to move to Harbor City, make a name for myself, and maybe even see Nat again, to show her the person I had become. But along with the news that I had been accepted into graduate school came another. The Jiang family's company had gone bankrupt, completely collapsed. When I heard the news, my mind went blank. Sophia seemed to pick up on something. She became a bit jealous, but firmly told me that Nat was fine. I grabbed her shoulders and demanded she say it again. She winced in pain, but I didn't let go. "I told you Nat will be fine, let go of me, it hurts." I studied her carefully for a long time, making sure she wasn't lying. Though I had no idea how she knew, as long as Nat was okay, that was all that mattered. Sure enough, one late night, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. It was Nat. She stood there, like the first snow of winter pure, fleeting. "Thank goodness you're okay." I couldn't believe it as I touched her face and pulled her into my arms. "Ethan?" After a long while, I turned around and saw Sophia standing there, watching silently for who knows how long. Nat stayed for a while. Sophia began arguing with me. She said things like, "In any story, you're not supposed to take Nat in. That's Lucas's role." What kind of nonsense was that? That man had broken off the engagement before the Jiang family's collapse. Nat has been through so much, and you still want to drive her out? Do you even have a heart? Stop being unreasonable. Nat couldn't have deliberately fallen just to frame you. These macarons, you don't want them? Then give them to Nat. This money is only enough for one dress. Nat isn't used to cheap clothing, you'll have to put up with it for now. Every hurtful word spilled from my mouth. Over time, Sophia stopped arguing with me. She became unusually quiet, spending her days running her sandwich shop and handing over all her earnings to me. A sense of unease grew within me. I was moving to Harbor City for work. When we get there, we'll live separately. Nat will move out. When she heard this, Sophia's eyes sparkled with hope. She asked tentatively, "Are you serious?" I said, of course I was. It was true, Nat wanted to live in a livelier area. Soon after, Sophia discovered I was giving most of my salary to Nat. She felt deceived and exploded in anger. Furious, she shouted that she hated me and said I might as well be with Natalie so that she could complete her task and return home. A crisp slap echoed through the air. Her head snapped to the side. I couldn't believe it. I had lost control and struck her. When she said I should be with Nat and that she was leaving, my hand moved on its own. My hand trembled as I tried to speak, to apologize, but she had already turned away. Her expression was unreadable. She walked away, pushing her sandwich cart, and I chased after her, calling her name. She ignored me completely. My heart felt as if it were being ripped apart. After moving to the port city, our relationship began to deteriorate. It was as though an invisible wall had risen between us. I was too busy. There was no time to sit down and truly talk. One day, while shopping with Nat, we passed Sophia's sandwich shop and saw her familiar figure. Lucas was there again, buying her sandwiches. He gave her a generous tip of $1,000. Sophia didn't recognize him and treated him like any other wealthy customer. Afraid that Nat, who still hadn't fully moved on from Lucas, would be upset, I quickly led her away. I didn't dare meet Sophia's gaze. From that day on, I desperately wanted to leave the city. Here, my connection with Sophia was slipping away a little more every day. And here, Lucas still existed. Even though my initial motives for being with her were selfish, the feelings that grew between us were real. Sophia was the partner I wanted for life. Coincidentally, Nat came to me crying one day, saying she had decided to move on from Lucas. She said she wanted to go back home. I told her I had already applied for a transfer to the branch office back home and that she could come with us. Back home. Back to the place where I first met Sophia. But in the end, there was no going back. I saw that mysterious system interface. To my shock, Sophia was communicating with it. Was all of this a dream? 5 hours left to leave. The fleeting time passed in the blink of an eye. I wanted to lie to myself, but 5 hours, no matter how I calculated it, was far too short. I rushed home after work. The house felt eerily empty. Her sandwich cart wasn't parked outside her shop. Maybe she'd gone to restock supplies. But why were her clothes and belongings missing? I searched through the closet and found that even some of my own clothes were gone. All the sweaters Sophia had knitted for me gone. The ties, socks she gifted me gone. Even the flower pots on the balcony stood bare. I sprinted out the door. Impossible, she wouldn't just leave me like this. At the mall, I saw her. She was still here. That glowing system interface was still with her. I pretended not to notice it and watched as she spent all her savings on a bracelet. My mentor always said I was smart. And it was true. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made it into a top university. But now, I despised my intelligence. She had spent nearly everything she had on that bracelet. It was a clear sign of her final goodbye. There was no turning back. After all we've been through, let's part ways peacefully. Goodbye forever. Her words shattered my heart into pieces. 3, 2, 1. She vanished from my arms. I was left holding air, collapsing to my knees. Tears streamed down my face. It felt just like the day I first brought her home, years later. I quit my job and was labeled a madman by friends. I tried every possible way and finally contacted that mysterious system. It looked down at me coldly and asked what I wanted and what I could offer in exchange. I said I was willing to give up everything just to relive it all. The system replied, "Your value isn't enough. Time travel is beyond your means." I begged to at least go to her side and be with her. The system still rejected me. "You can't afford that either." Finally, I pleaded, "Let me see her just one more time." The system responded, "Fine, you can have 5 minutes. Please provide the ID and nickname of the person you wish to view." I recited the numbers I had memorized for years. ID 88,998, nickname is Sophia. I waited with all my heart, desperate to see her again. The system replied, "Error, no match found." What? I stood frozen in disbelief. "The fee has been deducted. No refunds." The system added, "Her real name isn't Sophia, that's just her nickname." The system seemed to show a hint of pity and continued, "The system offers a quick search feature. If you can provide proof of familial connection, you can bypass identity verification." Proof of connection. Accepted documents include marriage certificates, family registries, etc. Marriage certificate? I didn't have one. I collapsed to the ground and soon lost consciousness. Sophia, my Sophia,